All right, so this video is about how Jesus didn't speak biblically and was a prophet. He didn't speak according to the scriptures that were in place before Jesus got there. So in Matthew 5:38 and 39, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." So those were the scriptures before Jesus came on the scene. Then when Jesus came, he said, "But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." And then in Matthew 5:43 through 47, their scriptures before Jesus came said, "You have heard that it was said." So their scriptures before Jesus came said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." So these were scriptures given to supposedly people that had heard from God before Jesus came on the scene. And they're writing down all these scriptures because apparently they heard from God. And I do believe some heard from God, but not all. So that's apparent in today's world. You know, there's a lot of false prophecies, a lot of false prophets. That is proof that not everybody is hearing from God. All right, so proof again. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But then Jesus says, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that?" So before Jesus came on the scene, it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. So people were hearing from God before Jesus came. And that's what the scripture said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. And if Jesus is God, so if Jesus was supposedly telling people before he came to earth, hey, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. And then he comes to earth and he says the opposite. He says the opposite of what was in the scriptures. To love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So how were people hearing from God when they wrote the Bible if Jesus came and he said something entirely different? He said something completely opposite. All right, so if people heard from God and wrote the Old Testament, why would Jesus, as God, if Jesus is God, because in John 14:12 it says, "You will be able to do the things that I have done and even greater things than I have done." So if Jesus is God, how are we? Then you also have to believe, if you believe that, then you also have to believe that we're going to be able to do greater things than God then. One day we're going to be, congrats guys, we're going to be doing greater things than God, according to what the Christians believe. So why would Jesus, as God, come down and write an entirely different scripture than what he supposedly told people to write in the Old Testament? Maybe it's possible that those people didn't truly hear from God in the first place, since Jesus is saying something entirely different. If hell was real, why would God then go to earth to suffer a horrible death to save people from himself, right? If he created, so to save people from not being tortured in hell forever by a place he created to torture his own children that he loves unconditionally. So if he made hell and he's going to send people to hell that don't believe in him, then, and they have to do all these other things, then if he loves his people, his children, unconditionally, why would he create hell for them and create a place to torture them for eternity, according to what the Christians believe, and then come to earth to torture himself so that to save people from himself? Like, does that make sense? That would mean God created hell and then he went to earth to torture himself to save people from the very thing he created, and to save people from himself, from him sending people to be tortured forever. That would mean his love would be on conditional terms and not unconditional. Near-death experiences show that this woman who saw hell, and I can make another video about this and show you guys this woman's testimony, her near-death experience testimony, that when she did see hell, it was because she was religious and believed that she had to go to purgatory first. So after she experienced hell, she then went straight to heaven. So she didn't stay and burn in hell forever. And there wasn't a lake of fire when she did go to hell. So after she experienced hell, she then went straight to heaven. The reason for this was because she believed she would go to hell first, because in her religion, they teach her that, hey, you got to go to purgatory first. So essentially, she then manifested that reality when she died, while the other people went straight to their life review in the afterlife. So conclusion, prophets do not have to be biblical due to inaccuracies and misinterpretations in the Bible. That's how they control the people, is telling even the prophets they have to be biblical so that the people do not get to the truth. Just like Jesus wasn't biblical and went against the religious teachings of his time. They called him blasphemous, and they even killed him for going against their teachings. That's how they keep people in these control systems. And then they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about the prophets? Because if the prophets come to earth and they say an entirely different message, what's that going to do to our control system, to our religions? Oh my gosh, it's going to lead people to the truth, right? And back to God and back to the divinity of God when they realize their oneness with God. So what do? We got to tell the prophets they have to be biblical. They have to be in this, this Bible that they created and that they invented for people, for humanity. And they pick and chose what books went in there. They took books out. They took verses out that showed us, like in the book of Thomas, it shows us that we are one with God. And they took that book out. Ooh, why? They're hiding stuff when they take these books out. So, yeah, prophets do not have to be biblical. Jesus wasn't biblical. What if there's inaccuracies and misinterpretations in the Bible? Then the whole world is being led astray. Let me ask you guys this question. Could this be the biggest lie of humanity, the biggest deception, the biggest lie is having everybody believe everything in the Bible? Now, I don't think everything's false in the Bible. There's a lot of things that are true, but there's a lot of things that aren't true either. It's not 100% accurate. So, with that said, it was great hanging out with you guys. Love you guys, and I will see you guys in the next video. All right, see you guys later. All right, bye.